Hey everyone, Joshua Kirk here with you once again. Now it's time for episode 227 of Album of the Day, in which for today's album review, I'm going to be reviewing the Sophomore record by a UK duo of two 19-year-old girls who are making this I just say young girls who are making this indie pop music that definitely has pop song structures with verses and choruses, but is kind of bending its edges a little bit and creating this really kind of psychedelic and wonderfully bizarre sort of indie pop, which is why they pretty much describe themselves as experimental sludge pop. I'm talking about the duo known as Let's Eat Grandma, which of course, in case you're wondering, that name is not promoting cannibalism. It's basically just a grammar joke, but it kind of fits, the cleverness of this band and how they're willing to bend the edges of pop music. So I'm here to review their most recent album, which was released on June 29th, 2018. And the album is called I'm All Ears. And I will say this is one of my favorite album covers of the year. This is definitely one of my favorite indie pop records of the year, and also doubles as one of my favorite electronic records of the year. Like, if there's one genre in 2018 that I think didn't really have as fruitful of a year in 2018, it's electronic music. I mean, there's been a few really good electronic records that definitely made their way into my year-end list, but not as much as 2017, I would say. But anyway, this is what the vinyl looks like. There's 11 tracks on this album, and it's over 52 minutes, because there's some longer pieces towards the end. And released on Transgressive Records, which is, I think, is a subsidiary of Pious. There's a couple of sleeves. These are just the thank yous. And a download code, which I already used. There's side A. And then there's side B. And these are the credits, which the actual names of the girls in this duo are Rosa Walton and Jenny Hollingworth. Side C and side D. Double LP. Yeah, and that's the vinyl packaging for Let's Eat Grandma, the new album. I'm All Ears, the latest album from Let's Eat Grandma. Now, this is a band that I had heard about a couple of years before, somewhere around late 2016, but it wasn't until 2018 when I finally got to check out their music. Philip Colsores, or however you say his name, he's an editor for Uproxx. He recommended this record to me, and I'm definitely glad that he did, because I have found one of my favorite indie electronic experimental records of the year. Well, right off the bat, you definitely can see that this is indie pop, but definitely with a little more aggression, and it's kind of mean. You can feel that right away with the opening track, Whitewater, which is this incredible interlude, which has this kind of industrial sort of vibe to it. It's got some kind of gothy cellos in there, as well as this really cool kind of Nine Inch Nails inspired groove, and just this really mean and aggressive bass synth It's definitely a really like killer opener for this record. Uh, It definitely is the kind of thing that isn't really the typical like 3-minute pop song that would normally open an album. That's what makes this band so cool, is how they're willing to just kind of do things a little like in a more kind of ambitious way. And then after that, we go into the first actual song on the record, the lead single, Hot Pink. And let me say, this song is a jam. Definitely one of my jams of 2018. 18. It starts out kind of as a typical pop song. It's got some really nice production to it. It's some beautiful vocals. I mean, for some young girls who are just kind of starting their 20s, they really know how to sing well and keep a perfect pitch. But then once that chaotic drum machine and like kind of squeaking synth comes in, it definitely transitions into something much darker and much freakier. So it kind of makes sense that my girl Sophie actually co-produced this song, which if you have not listened to Sophie, I highly recommend her stuff. Check out her debut album, Oil of Every Pearls on Insides, which is, again, a pretty excellent electronic record in a year that, kind of, lacked a little bit in strong electronic records overall. And I love all the cool sort of production effects going on this song. Not just in the chorus, but also in the end. It's kind of lo-fi, and it features this really cool kind of skip, sort of this point where the vocal kind of skips, so you get running out of, running out of, running out of. It's a catchy little groove at the end. It definitely has an effect that's comparable to that of the midsection of Tame Impala's Let It Happen. And then after that, one of my favorite tracks on this record, one of my top 3, actually, the song It's Not Just Me, which is another single from here. And this song does feature some of the best lyrics on the record. There are lyrics in here, like, kind of about, friendship and, trying to sort of, stick together and together through all the hurdles of life. So even though this is a record that is very out there and bizarre, there definitely are some very accessible moments on here too, like this track. Even though in the chorus you can definitely see there's some extra little nuances on there, and you can hear the kind of off-kilter Sophie production on this track as well. So, and I love how real and raw the vocal performance sounds in that. Like in the third verse, you can actually kind of hear the vocalist kind of somewhat laughing a little bit while she's singing, really showing that they're willing to just keep. This band is willing to just keep all their spirit that they have like inside of the recordings, and they're not trying to let some foolproof producer sort of create a formula and cut out all the the blemishes that may occur. And then we go into some longer, more ambitious pieces. We have the song Falling Into Me, which has definitely a very interesting song structure to it. It starts out very kind of, is like some euphoric 80s inspired kind of new wave, but then it transitions into this kind of funky sort of midsection. But then it transitions into this really funky midsection, featuring some really cool kind of scatty vocals in the chorus, kind of showing that there's an effect in the vocals similar to that of like rapping, because it's like kind of fast and kind of fast and hypnotic. Hypnotic, and yet it really works. And I also do really like that end section too. The section 2, the kind of Nine Inch Nails inspired bass synth on there is incredible, and so as are the other layers of synths on this track. There's definitely some really cool, elegant nuance here, and some interesting effects on the vocals too. And then after that is another one of my absolute favorite tracks on this record, Snakes and Ladders, which kind of has a little more of a straight ahead sort of indie rock feel to it, but it features some really cool song structure and some kind of there's kind of a sense of drama and theatrics to the song that I really like too. Like in that midsection, you have that awesome like synth solo and that kind of skittering and dramatic piano. And this is definitely one track where you can see a little bit of almost rapping sort of feel to the vocals on this track, and the singer really puts a lot of emotion into her vocals, really making you feel the words she says, really showing that, you know, even those who are like way older than they are can really relate to what she's talking about. About it, and I really like those higher range that she goes into that chaotic end section of the song. Definitely one of the standouts here. Another one of the more accessible tracks on here is the song "I Will Be Waiting for You," which definitely is like a pop song, but yet it definitely is, you know, not really like the conventional pop song. I mean, even its structure is a little different, because most songs would be like verse, chorus, but this song is pretty much like a verse, a chorus, a bridge, and a chorus, and yet it really works well here. And there's some interesting instrumental effects in there. I love that kind of twinkly vibraphone in the mix. And those really cool kind of frothy synthesizers that seem to be sampling a choir. I mean, the choir samples that are used on this album are really cool on songs like this one and Falling Into Me. There's a couple of interlude tracks on here that are very kind of odd. Definitely some of the odder moments here on this record, like the track Missed Call number 1, which is kind of like, it sounds to me like the kind of that keyboard that sort of, it kind of sounds like some sort of MIDI strings sort of samples that you would play on a keyboard board on something like GarageBand or something like that. And it's the kind of thing where if you may hear it on first listen and think, what is this? But after a while it does. After a while, it definitely has grown on me to the point where it's a cool little kind of, twist in the middle of all these really cool, ambitious pop songs. The other one on here, The Cat's Pajamas, is also really bizarre, but, not really for the best, in my opinion. It's basically just a little organ line and sound effects of a cat purring, and you can hear its tongue licking, and it just doesn't really feel like anything necessary, but rather just a really awkward filler moment. But overall, definitely a lot to love about this album, I would say. Heck, I even love some of the extended cuts on this record, which 2 of them are on the back half of the album. The first of those being the 9-minute cool and collected, which I know could be a little long for some people, but personally, I love how they're able to stretch the song for 9 minutes and still keep me engaged and not leave me bored at all. At all. First of all, one of the best vocal performances on this entire record is from this song. Especially in that chorus. Cool and collected. I love that. That, like, you can really feel, you can really feel the lyrics on here, which this is definitely one of the most ambitious love songs I've heard in 2018, and there's some really cool instrumental moments. There's that kind of eerie, mystical, psychedelic guitar solo in the middle, and then there's one section of the song that's kind of droney and intense. Intense with some really cool piano playing. And some kind of droney baritone guitars. And then the end section of the song, is definitely also very psychedelic and features yet another pretty incredible guitar solo, and an even better one, I think, than earlier in the song even. In the song, definitely, definitely does a good job of justifying its runtime of 9 minutes and 17 seconds. I will say probably my least favorite track on here would have to be the song Ava. Like, for a while, I thought it was the Cat's Pajamas interlude, but recently it kind of turned into this song being my least favorite track, because I find that it just feels really out of place in this record. It's just, to me, it just kind of, it does have some really interesting lyrics and all, but, it is just kind of, a basic piano ballad, and it's kind of unlike pretty much the rest of this album, which is like, bends the edges of indie pop, so it just feels like the band really playing it safe here. Again, decent song, but, doesn't need to be on this particular album. But right after that lull is my favorite track on the record, Donnie Darko, which I'm pretty sure probably gets its name from the 2000s psychological thriller of the same name, which I think that kind of makes sense because this song is very dark. It's definitely one of the darkest moments on this entire record. Like, musically, it's got a really cool feel to it. It's got this kind of like Western film inspired kind of desert-like guitar riff that sounds awesome. And it definitely is a song that, while it lasts for over 11 minutes, I am just bobbing my head the whole time, pretty much. I love how it's like really weird and ambitious, but yet you can still just dance to it. Dance to it. A really cool guitar solo before that, like, drum machine kicks in, which I will tell you, once the drum machine kicks in, it just turns into this total jam. Total jam with some really killer synth playing, and then they both come in with some extremely dark lyrics that sort of mention some pretty heavy things. So the song could be about a particular type of mental illness, something like schizophrenia or something like that, because I'm hearing lyrics like dialing 999 on the narrator's phone, as well as gruesome imagery even of skin peeling like clementines. Really showing someone just going crazy and kind of being on this really bad sort of acid trip, and it just sounds so wonderful over the beat. over the beat. And then the song has a kind of explosive ending featuring some really cathartic vocals, and it's probably the brightest sounding moment on the entire record. And it really does explode at the right time, and then eventually it does kind of, fall apart in the end, leaving just a kind of hypnotic, drony synth line and a vocal. But it really does manage to leave quite an impact on the listener. So it's definitely a worthy finish to this amazing record. Yeah, I definitely really like this album. It definitely is. Definitely came as a surprise to me, like how ambitious these two young girls really are. I mean, normally very ambitious artists would be people who are much older than them, but the fact that they are willing to just kind of take risks and still make some really well made pop songs definitely is quite a skill that I have to give them props for. And it definitely deserves all the critical acclaim that it's gotten. So it kind of makes sense. When I first listened to this album, I saw very little flaws with it. As I kept on listening to it, I did begin to see some cons as well as pros, but I still definitely love this album enough to give it an 8.5 out of 10. So that's my review of Let's Eat Grandma's most recent album, I'm All Ears, and I'll see you for episode 228.